You're listening to Weird Medicine with Dr. Steve on the Riotcast Network, riotcast.com.
I've got diphtheria crushing my esophagus. I've got Ebola vibes dripping from my nose. I've got the leprosy of the heart valve, exacerbating my incredible woes. I want to take my brain out and blast it with the wave, an ultrasonic, echographic, and a pulsating shave. I want a magic pill for all my ailments, the health equivalent of Citizen Kane. And if I don't get it now in the tablet, I think I'm doomed and I'll have to go insane. I want a requiem for my disease, so I'm paging Dr. Steve. Dr. Steve.
It's Weird Medicine, the first and still only uncensored medical show in the history of broadcast radio, now a podcast. I'm Dr. Steve, and this is a show for people who had never listened to a medical show on the radio or the internet. If you have a question you're embarrassed to take your regular medical provider, if you can't find an answer anywhere else, give us a call at 347-766-4323. That's 347-POOHEAD. Check us out on Twitter at Weird Medicine. Visit our website at drsteve.com for podcasts, medical news, and stuff you can buy, or go to our merchandise store at cafepress.com/weirdmedicine. You know what? Don't go there unless you want a Bristol stool scale mug. Those are pretty cool. I just need to make my own, but don't think you're helping us out. I made, I think, 20 cents last year at that place. But anyway, the Bristol stool scale mugs are cool, though. So cafepress.com/weirdmedicine. Most importantly, we are not your medical providers. Take everything here with a grain of salt. Don't act on anything you hear on this show without talking it over with your doctor, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, pharmacist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, yoga master, physical therapist, clinical laboratory scientist, registered dietitian, or whatever. Right. Very good. Please don't forget feels.com/fluid. You get 50% off your first order if you order a subscription, and you can try it out. It's broad spectrum CBD, pretty cool. And Dave Cecil's going to be doing the theme song for feels.com campaign, and I think it would be cool if they started using it for other stuff. We need to give Dave some love over here, so you're going to really like his theme music for this. And, it's a commercial, but you might. Anyway, whatever. It feels.com/fluid for 50% off your first order. If you do a subscription, you can cancel at any time. Don't forget to get your Amazon on at stuff.drsteve.com. I did check, and they still have surgical face masks if you are so inclined. Beat the lines at the pharmacy, and then the fights, and and you're standing in line with people, you're trying not to get sick, and then people have horrible viruses. So go to stuff.drsteve.com and do all your Amazon shopping there. And if you need some earbuds, check out tweakedaudio.com, offer code FLUID for 33% off. And if you would like to attain your ideal body weight, try Noom by going to noom.drsteve.com. It's Noom. I've sustained my ideal body weight for the first time since college, and I owe it all to Noom. I got to be honest with you. You get a counselor, you get group counselor. You have these little mini modules that you do every day, and it's not a diet. It's a way to break bad habits and to change your relationship with food, and I really do appreciate them. And check out Dr. Scott's bullshit at simplyherbals.net. Okay. Oh, he's a good little feller. He's all right. Wow. What a difference a week has made. I did the Opie Radio podcast last night out of the blue because of the coronavirus thing. And so that was cool, talking to the old Ope. If you remember, he was the one that greenlit this show in the first place. And, I've never been on this new show of his. So it was cool. We talked for about an hour, and I thought there may be people that are listening to this that don't listen to podcasts or whatever, or listen to that one. So there's a lot of interesting information out there right now. So I think for the next few weeks, we're going to be hitting the coronavirus thing pretty hard. So one of the things that came up was pandemic versus epidemic. So if something is endemic, it's always in a population. The example I use is obesity. Obesity is endemic, particularly in the United States. And so that's a disease that exists permanently in a particular region or population. Malaria could be considered endemic in some parts of the world. Then an epidemic is an outbreak of disease that attacks a lot of people at about the same time and may spread through one or several communities. That's an epidemic. And then a pandemic is when an epidemic spreads throughout the world. Well, there's more to it than just that. And so the World Health Organization provides a pandemic alert system. This was primarily created for influenza. And so that may have something to do with why this is not being used right now the way I would think that it would have been used. But I've got an article that we're going to read about why the WHO, at least as of this recording, has not declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Now, the virus is called SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so severe acute respiratory syndrome, CoV meaning coronavirus, 2 meaning this is genetically related to the original SARS virus that hit a decade ago, primarily in Asia, and they decided to call the disease COVID-19. So that would be coronavirus disease 2019. That's basically what it is. There's nothing that mysterious about it. But the World Health Organization has this influenza pandemic alert system, which you could use for other diseases as well. And phase 1 is low risk and phase 6 is full-blown pandemic. So let me go through the phases and see what you all think. So phase 1 is where there's a virus in animals that's caused no known infections in humans. So if they'd been aware of this coronavirus in the snakes or the bats, wherever it came from in Hunan, China, that would have been phase 1 if they'd been aware that those animals were getting ill. And then phase 2 is where the animal flu virus, or in this case, animal coronavirus, has caused infection in humans. And phase 3 is when you have sporadic cases or small clusters of the disease in humans, and human-to-human transmission, if it exists at all, is insufficient to cause community-level outbreaks. Then you have phase 4, where the risk of a pandemic is increased but not certain. And then phase 5 phase 4 is just kind of, it's whenever. It's kind of a dumb phase. We could just take that one out and make this a 5-phase system. Phase 5 is spread of disease between humans is occurring in more than one country or one WHO region. And then phase 6 is where there are community-level outbreaks in at least one additional country in a different WHO region from phase 5. And then at that point, a global pandemic is underway. Now, this is for influenza. We don't have a coronavirus pandemic thing. They can just say that. Look, that scale is just for influenza. So this is from New Scientist, which is a pretty good online and print journal. It says, prepare for a pandemic, says the World Health Organization, as the global spread of COVID-19 soars by the hour. It's not a matter of if, but when, says U.S. health officials. Yet, so far, the WHO refuses to actually call COVID-19 a pandemic. Well, why? And the answer may lie with what kicks into gear when we deploy the P word. Countries have pandemic plans that are launched when one is declared, but these plans may not be appropriate for combating COVID-19, and the WHO doesn't want countries to lurch in the wrong direction. So this sort of bolsters our idea we had a minute ago that they're not wanting to use that scale because that's an influenza scale. What they're looking for there is something like the 1918 swine flu that came through and became a global pandemic that killed at least 1 to 3% of the world's population. At that time, it's estimated 10% of people actually got the virus, which means 90% didn't, right? And of those, 10% did not make it. Now, this was in 1918, before Tamiflu, Xofluza, and before ventilators even, and modern healthcare. So we don't know how much that had an impact. And we won't know till this stuff sweeps through again and we see if we can do a little bit better. But, when you've got 10% of the world's population getting it and 10% of those dying, that's 1% of the world's population died. I mean, 99% of people didn't die, but, it's tragic for the 1% that did. And that's a huge damn number. Let's see let's see what the population of the world was in 1918. What was, I could ask Echo, I guess, the population of the world in 1918. This makes great radio when I'm typing stuff in. See, I don't have a Travis or what used to be a Sam Roberts. Now he's, a fancy man. World War I claimed 16 million lives. Influenza epidemic that swept the world in 1918 killed 50 million people. 1/5 of the world was attacked by this deadly virus. Well, that doesn't tell us what the world population was. It would be hard to calculate from that. Okay, so let's go back. Here we go. I'm looking right now at a world meter. And in 1918, it doesn't say. It goes back to 1900. It was 1.6 billion. In 1927, 2 billion. So let's just say 2 billion. Okay. So oh golly. Okay, well, it'll be more dramatic if she says it. Echo, what's 1% of 2 billion?
1% of 2 billion is 20 million.
20 million people. 20 million people. And you go, well, 99% of people didn't die. Well, but 20 million people did. That is a huge dang number, So this was going to be pretty interesting to see what happens next. Okay. So the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say the COVID-19 virus already meets 2 of its 3 criteria for a pandemic. It spreads between people and it kills. The third is it has to spread worldwide. The virus is now in 38 countries and counting on nearly all continents. Those are just the ones we know about. So how much more worldwide does it need to be? And epidemic experts say there are no global criteria. There used to be for flu pandemics, but the WHO abandoned them. Oh, okay. Well, shit. It's right here on their website. Isn't that interesting? Okay. How do I get back to that? The WHO abandoned them when it was criticized for declaring a flu pandemic in 2009 that triggered expensive countermeasures. Oh, God forbid you spend money trying to save lives in some countries which were deemed unnecessary. We deem these things unnecessary after the fact. That's the problem. So what you don't want to do is not do it and deem it necessary after the fact, and you haven't done it. So, stop criticizing them for being overly cautious when it comes to one of these effing viruses, please. So that bruising could be one reason the WHO seems anxious to avoid the P word. Now, past getting trashed for something doesn't stop you from doing the right thing. But now they're saying there's a more important one. There are 2 kinds of response to a growing pandemic. The first is containment. As cases appear, you isolate each person and then trace and quarantine their contacts. That worked for SARS and the 2014 to 2016 Ebola outbreak. But the second is mitigation. If containment only slows the virus, eventually you get community spread and people are infected without knowing how they were exposed, so you can't quarantine all contacts. All you can do is slow the epidemic so it won't peak massively and quickly, overloading health facilities. You close schools, you cancel mass gatherings. Oh no, no Coachella, as China did. I would be kind of sad about that, I guess. As China did, or as Italy is now doing, shut down whole cities when they have community spread. Flu skips between people so quickly that containment is really kind of a non-starter. Pandemic plans are mostly designed for flu, including those of the UK and the US, and they go straight to mitigation. They don't even mess with containment, even though we do a little containment. I know when I got influenza a couple of years ago, I was quarantined for 7 days. Of course, my family came and went, so they were just taking the virus everywhere. They didn't get it. So pandemic plans mostly okay. The UK plan suggests containment only if a new pandemic flu hasn't learned yet to spread as fast as normal flu, which is interesting. So you have these viruses. How fast do they spread from one person to another? How easily are they spread? Could you just cough on somebody and they get it? Or do you have to be in close proximity to them and cough on them multiple times? Or do they have to touch something that you touched? That's called fomite transmission, where you cough on your hand and then instead of sterilizing your hand, you go run to the bathroom where you grab the handle, and that mucus containing all those lovely viral particles is now all over that handle. And if the virus can survive like that for a while, the next person that grabs that handle to go in the bathroom can get those viral particles on their hand. Now, if they pish or take a dump and are disgusting and don't wash their hands, and you know who you are, they may then go eat, which is making me physically ill just thinking about it, and get those viruses in their mouth or their eye or their nose, and now they've picked up the virus, and that's called fomite transmission. So how easy is it to transmit? What's the incubation time? Are there asymptomatic carriers? In other words, there are people walking around that don't know they have the disease, and they're spreading it like crazy before they actually get sick. And that's the dangerous thing, because, you got people running around giving people the virus. They don't even know they've got it. And then how lethal is it? How lethal and what time period are you transmitting virus? Is it through the whole time from the day you get exposed? Or is it much later and right before you become symptomatic? So all of these things are important to how virulent a disease like this can be and how deadly it can be. So in this light, statements from the WHO start to make sense. It's not either or, said the WHO Director Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus this week. We must focus on containment while doing everything we can to prepare for a potential pandemic. David Hyman, he said David, who led the WHO's fight against SARS, says you need both containment and mitigation. Bruce Aylward of the WHO, just back from handling an international mission to China, reports that it used full-on mitigation, stopping travel, keeping people inside, shutting down the huge city of Wuhan in Hubei province, which had community spread before control efforts even began. As a result, the epidemic stopped climbing and new cases are falling steeply. So this containment strategy seems to be working, at least in these communities where it's started to spread. Everywhere else, China stopped community spread from developing by contact tracing and quarantine, reminding everyone to wash their hands, there you go, and monitor their temperature. Some places also used mitigation measures such as canceling public gatherings, school, and work as well. You don't have to do that for real long. You just do that until the cases start to drop, and then you can open back up again most of the time. The key, says Aylward, was tailoring the approach to local circumstances. So that's right. If you have a one-size-fits-all strategy for this kind of stuff, you'll never get anywhere. Or you will be less effective than if you tailor the response to the situation. Now, I will tell you this, that I read an article just recently where they were able to sequence the spike protein of the coronavirus. Now, the spike protein is the protein, looks like a shark's tooth that attaches to a human cell. The outer membranes merge, allowing this virus to then just, bloop its DNA into the cell. That DNA now takes over the nucleus and starts making copies of itself. And, the ribosomes are now transcribing copies of viral DNA instead of the DNA that you need to keep your cell operating. And then you just, eventually just all these viral particles come shooting out of this cell and ready to infect more cells. And as long as you make a valid immune response to these, you can eventually block those viruses from infecting further cells, and then you clear the disease, and then you've got lifelong immunity to that particular set of antigens on those coronavirus surfaces. But in the meantime, you're coughing out mucus that has these viral particles, and you're giving it to people. And it looks like there may be fecal oral transmission of this too. So somehow this damn virus gets into your turds, and if you don't wash your hair, well, yeah, do that. But if you don't wash your hands great after eliminating your bowels or evacuating your bowels, and then you prepare food for someone or you shake their hand or whatever, you may be able to transmit it that way. So this seems to be the WHO's concern. Call this a pandemic, and countries will apply blanket measures designed for the flu. And people think it's like SARS, so you do things that way, or it's a pandemic, so you run and mitigate. Aylward said during a press conference in Beijing, if we only approach it with a binary SARS influenza mentality, we're not going to have the agility of approach that we've seen in China that's going to be fundamental to beating this on a global scale. Well, it makes perfect sense to me. Good for the WHO for having a somewhat nuanced approach, and I'm glad it's not just that they got beat up before when they did this before. However, the thinking seems to be binary. The head of the CDC Center for Respiratory Diseases says the U.S. will use containment till it gets signs of community spread, then the strategy will change. Meanwhile, the WHO seems to have a third problem with the P word. Using the word pandemic now doesn't fit the facts, but may certainly cause fear, said Tedros. Asked about the WHO's reluctance to call it a pandemic, WHO spokesperson Tariq Jazarevic said it's important to focus on actions and not on words. Well.
Give yourself a bill.
True, but words do matter. Reluctance to tell the public the truth. Okay, now they're editorializing. For fear of causing panic has plagued responses to other disease emergencies, notably bovine spongiform encephalopathy in Britain. Well, we could talk about that one for a little while, a.k.a. mad cow disease. Risk communication experts warn that not telling the public that containment will not prevent a pandemic but might slow it risks greater shock over what comes next. Okay, well, words do matter, and I'm actually quite impressed that the WHO is taking this sort of nuanced approach to this. So, we'll see how this plays out. Here's one where, our president said, well, when it gets warm, that'll be the end of this virus. And so I wonder if that's true because, there is disease in Italy and I think in Australia as well. It's pretty warm in Australia right now because it's middle of their summer. I've lost my mouse. Okay, there we go. Let's see here. Will the COVID-19 outbreak caused by the new coronavirus fade as the northern hemisphere warms up? This has been suggested by some researchers and repeated by some political leaders, including U.S. President Donald Trump. But we simply don't know if it's the case. Of course we don't know. We don't know anything about this virus. We're learning really fast. And they have a DNA analysis of it. And let me go back before I continue on this. We were talking about the spike protein. That's the key to making a vaccine. So now we have sequenced it. We can make it in the lab even. We can take that DNA, put it into bacteria, have them just spew out this spike protein. and see, and then inject it into people and see if when they make a immune response, if that also blocks them from getting the COVID-19 disease, which is caused by what? What's it caused by? Caused by SARS-CoV-2. Very good. You've been listening.
Give yourself a bill.
So Trudy Lang at the University of Oxford says, we absolutely don't know that. Keep asking virologist colleagues, and nobody knows. How would they know? There's no way to know. So when you hear people say the weather will warm up and it'll just disappear, that's an unhelpful generalization. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a supposition. It's not really a generalization, is it? That's the wrong word. Or a hypothesis. The heat, okay, so renowned virologist Donald Trump said on the 10th of February, the heat, generally speaking, kills this kind of virus. A lot of people think it goes away in April as the heat comes in. Well, there are people that think that is true. He isn't the only politician to make that sort of claim. Of course, we don't care about what politicians say. I'm very interested in what scientists are saying. It is thought the virus can survive for up to 4 days on surfaces. And what is that called when it survives on a surface and someone touches it and sticks their finger in their nose and gets the disease? Did I hear you say fomite transmission?
Give yourself a bill.
You are absolutely correct. You guys are good. Some researchers, including Paul Hunter at the University of East Anglia, UK, do think the new coronavirus won't survive for long in warmer conditions. One extreme scenario is that it will burn itself out sometime in the summer, says Hunter. The other extreme scenario is it will reduce in the summer but will come back again in the winter and become what we call endemic, that it will spread pretty much everywhere. However, if it's less infectious in warmer conditions, there's a greater chance of it spreading in the southern hemisphere as conditions there cool. Of course, we see that right now with influenza, don't we? You know, influenza just kind of circles the globe, doing its thing in the southern hemisphere in our summer, and in the northern hemisphere in our winter, and mutating like a piece of crap that it is. But we're going to get you influenza very soon. We will have a universal influenza vaccine that will not be reliant on guessing what the different proteins it's going to mutate on its surface over the next few months when they're trying to make these vaccines. So it's sort of like handicapping a horse. You do everything right and still get it wrong. So the universal vaccine is coming. Let's see if there's anything interesting on the universal vaccine right now. Universal vaccine, influenza. All right, again, fascinating to have me doing this. Oh, now there are some studies that are just coming out now. Universal vaccine placed on ectodomain of matrix protein 2 of influenza A. Let's see what kind of response they got. Okay, this is these are mouse models. We show adaptive transfer of wild type AM into mice restores protection by passively transferring. Geez, boy, this is a dense study right here. And this is a murine study, so they did this in mice in the Journal of Immunology. Of course, this is 2017. Let's see if we can find something a little more up to date. Here is a page on universal influenza vaccine research from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. It says a key focus of NIAID's influence.
Today's episode is brought to you by Angie. Angie has made it easier than ever to connect with skilled professionals to get all your jobs and projects done well. Let me tell you, there's the version of it where you try to do something at home, and then there's a version of it where you have someone help you, you watch them do it the right way, and you go, thank God I didn't try to do that myself. I have fully done things around the home that I think look good, and then a bang in the night, and I wake up to a shelf collapsing, a painting falling off the wall. I've seen it all go south. I own a home, and I can tell you, I know how much work it can take. Whether it's everyday maintenance and repairs or making dream projects a reality, it can be hard just to know where to start. But now all you need to do is Angie that and find a skilled local pro who will deliver the quality and expertise you need. Whatever your home project, big or small, indoor or outdoor. You can Angie that and connect with skilled professionals to get the project done well. Right now, one of my wish lists is I want a bike for my condo in Milwaukee, and I would love to rig it up on a pulley in the ceiling because I have one of those like lofted ceilings, but I'm so scared to try that on my own. Angie has 20 years of home experience, and they've combined it with new tools to simplify the whole process. Bring them your project online or with the Angie app. Answer a few questions and Angie can handle the rest from start to finish, or help you compare quotes from multiple pros and connect instantly, which means you can take care of any home project in just a few taps. Because when it comes to getting the most out of your home, you can do this when you Angie that. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com.
All right. Key focus of NIAID's influenza research program in developing a universal flu vaccine, or a vaccine that provides robust, long-lasting protection against multiple subtypes of flu rather than a select flu. Such a vaccine would eliminate the need to update and administer seasonal flu vaccine every year. Yeah, you could just get a flu shot as part of your kid thing and be done with it. So flu viruses are classified by two proteins on the outer surface of the virus. There's hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. And those are the H and N. So you hear H1N1, so that's hemagglutinin 1, neuraminidase 1. That would be sort of like swine flu. So there's 18 different H types and 11 different N subtypes. And viruses can be further broken down into different strains within those subtypes. For example, there are various strains of H1N1, and the H protein, also called HA, enables the flu virus to enter a human cell. It's made up of a head and a stem. Ooh, sort of like my favorite body part. Seasonal flu vaccines fight infection by inducing antibodies that target the HA head. This region varies from season to season, which is why flu vaccines must be updated every year. However, scientists discovered the stem typically remains unchanged, making an ideal target for antibodies induced by a universal flu vaccine. Because there's got to be something that makes flu, right? If it mutates too much, it no longer becomes influenza. So we want a universal flu vaccine that would be at least 75% effective and protect against, both Group 1 and Group 2 influenza A viruses, and have durable protection that lasts at least a year, and you would hope it would be lifetime and be suitable for all age groups. So in February of 2018, they released their Universal Influenza Vaccine Strategic Plan outlining the Institute's research priorities. And so they've got, so there are some leading vaccine strategies and candidates already. They're studying various strategies to create a vaccine that elicit antibodies targeting the HA stem. For example, they designed an experimental vaccine featuring the protein ferritin, which is involved in, red blood cells, which can self-assemble into microscopic pieces called nanoparticles as a key component. Now, this is cool. The vaccine showed promise in animal testing is being evaluated for future trials in humans. Damn. So we're doing some nanoparticle mess. These little things are really what we're fighting as a little machine. Viruses aren't alive in the sense that they don't respire. They don't reproduce the same way that we think of things that are alive, but they are little self-replicating machines that go in and hijack another cell's mechanisms and then make copies of themselves. Why? I don't know. It's the viruses got to live too. They're just able to do it. It's a natural selection thing where they're just able to do it, but it's not life. It's a shitty form of pre-life. They suck, and I hate them, but there is a possibility that we have viral DNA in our genome, and that's actually caused mutations that may have been beneficial to humans. So it is kind of fascinating to think about. We'll look that up in a minute too. What the hell? In another approach to a universal flu vaccine, NIAID scientists developed a vaccine incorporating 4 subtypes of the H protein into one vaccine. It's made from non-infectious virus-like particles that stimulate an immune response but cannot replicate or cause disease. Those have been promising as well. So they've got phase 1 and 2 studies of universal flu vaccines, strategies that include investigational DNA-based vaccine, followed by a licensed seasonal influenza vaccine, which is considered a booster to improve the potency and durability of these seasonal influenza vaccines. So now they're into phase 2 clinical trial of a universal influenza vaccine called M001. This vaccine, which was developed and produced by some company, I'm not going to say their name, out of Israel, contains antigenic peptide sequences shared among many different influenza strains. Well, that's interesting. So what are these different phases? So let's do phases, because I don't want to get this wrong, of a clinical trial. And just remember that they're in phase 2 of this influenza vaccine, which doesn't sound very sexy, the vaccine that they're doing to me. So let's see here. So phase 2 studies test the efficacy, in other words, how effective the drug or the device is. The second phase of testing can last from several months to 2 years, involves up to several hundred patients. Most phase 2 studies are randomized trials where one group of patients receives the drug and a second control group receives a standardized treatment or placebo. So often these studies are blinded, which means that neither the patients nor the researchers know who has received the experimental drug, or in this case, vaccine. So this is called what? Let's see if you guys are paying it. Yes, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial.
Give yourself a bill.
So then you got phase 3 studies where they do several hundred to several thousand patients. So they scale it up to large-scale testing. It can go on for several years. And they look at more thorough understanding of the effectiveness of the drug, the benefits, and the range of possible adverse reactions. And then they also, once they finish phase 3, they can request FDA approval for marketing of the drug. So they're looking at safety as well. And then phase 4 studies are post-marketing surveillance trials. So these are studies that are done after the stuff hits the market, looking at high numbers of people taking whatever this drug is and making sure that it was as safe as they thought it was when they started. All right. Anything else? Yeah, that's about it, right? I know I felt like I was getting off on something interesting, and I guess we talked about it all. Well, let's just take some phone calls. If you guys have questions about, look, I'm going to update you on this until it goes away. Right now, what do you do? Avoid places where this stuff is in the community. If you get a fever, because look, influenza hadn't gone away. Influenza is sort of the devil we know. There's been 30 million cases, 300,000 hospitalizations, and 30,000 deaths of influenza already this year. So that's a tenth of our population, right? We got about, 400, just under a tenth. We've got 450 million people in the United States right now. I don't know what the population of the United States is. Let's find out. Echo, what's the population of the United States right now?
The population of the United States is about 326 million.
Oh, I thought it was more than that. Okay, I thought it was 350 million a while back. Okay, so about just under 10% of people have gotten it. And of those, we're looking at, let's see. It's like a half of 1% maybe, or maybe 0.1%. Echo, what's 30,000 divided by 30 million?
30,000 divided by 30 million is 0.001.
0.001. Okay, so times 100 is, okay, so like 0.1%. Yeah, so this influenza is not, look, 30,000 is a huge number, and that's tragic when it happens, but a 0.1% mortality rate is pretty low considering we've had some as high as 10%, maybe even higher. So the COVID looks like it's more around 2 to 3%, although somebody made the point on Twitter, which I can't argue with, that we have incomplete numbers because they're counting people who are just now getting the disease. They haven't had the chance to go through the disease all the way to see if they live or die. So that number may be higher than that. So we'll know very soon what the mortality rate of this virus is as it comes through. So, all right. So yeah, don't forget about influenza. No, it's never too late to get your influenza vaccine. If you hadn't done it, go do it. One less virus you got to worry about. You may still get the influenza syndrome, but you'll be less likely to get it. You'll be less likely to be hospitalized because of it, and you'll be less likely to die from it. So, all right. Okie doke. Well, how about some dick and nut stuff? That we haven't talked about any of those delightful things today.
Number one thing, don't take advice from some asshole on the radio.
All right. Here we go. Let's see what this feller has to say.
Hello, Dr. Steve.
Hey.
I am a 40-year-old male, and I make my own milk. I just squeeze my nipple really hard, and a little bit of milk comes out, and then I drink it. So, Of course, I'm kidding about that. I'm trying to actually avoid growing man tits is what I'm calling about. I make my own milk using almonds or cashews or soybeans. I make it at home. And I'm interested in soy milk because it actually lasts longer as compared to almond milk, and it tastes better, provided that the only ingredient is soy and water as opposed to just almonds and water, etc. Does soy milk make you grow man tits, as everybody on the internet likes to say? Thank you.
Okay, so I want to answer the first thing first. Male lactation is not it's not normal. It can happen. It can happen with enough stimulation of the male nipple. Production of the hormone prolactin is what you need to induce lactation, so it really doesn't occur under normal conditions in males. So it requires a lot of stimulation of that nipple. So there are some drugs that can be used to increase lactation, and people who have been who are recovering from starvation, because the glands that produce the hormones recover faster than the liver, which breaks down the hormones, so they get these high hormone levels, which is just a crazy thing. So galactorrhea is the term for that. It's not really male lactation. And I would just take 2 seconds and get that checked. You can have a testosterone deficiency where you have male hypogonadism or low testosterone, and you can have galactorrhea. It can also happen if you already have gynecomastia or man boobs. And if you have testosterone deficiency, of course, you may have a lack of sexual desire and some other things like that. So I would probably get that checked out. And but it can be totally benign as well. Now, soy milk. Soy is rich in these things called isoflavones, which are basically plant-based molecules that have estrogen-like activity. There have been cases of gynecomastia associated with soy product consumption. That's, matter of fact, this is an article from Endocrinology Practice from 2008 called An Unusual Case of Gynecomastia Associated with Soy Product Consumption. And in this, a 60-year-old man was referred to the endocrinology clinic for evaluation of bilateral gynecomastia, a.k.a. man boobs, of 6 months' duration. He reported erectile dysfunction and decreased libido. So you're already thinking something's wrong with this guy's testosterone. On further review of systems, he reported no changes in testicular size, no history. I wouldn't know if my nuts change size. It's not like I'm fondling them every 5 minutes. No testicular trauma, no sexually transmitted diseases or headaches, visual changes. Why are they wondering about that? They're wondering about a pituitary tumor. No change in muscular mass or strength. Initial laboratory assessment showed estrone and estradiol concentration to be fourfold increased in the upper limit of the reference range. So estrone and estradiol are female hormones, And they must have had a high suspicion to have done those tests. I'm assuming, were follow-up tests. Subsequent findings from testicular ultrasonography, computed tomography of the chest. This guy had the whole workup, abdomen and pelvis, and positron emission tomography. Okay, so they did PET scan, so positron emission tomography. You're looking for metastatic cancer is what they were looking for. All of these things were normal. It is interesting, by the way, that we use positrons. That's antimatter. Positrons are positively charged electrons, and that is antimatter. Truly antimatter, and they make it in these just minute quantities by actually synthesizing a normal matter isotope that breaks down, and one of the as it's decaying, one of the things it casts off are a positively charged electron, and 50 years ago, maybe it's 50 years ago, we didn't even know what the hell antimatter was. And then this guy Dirac has this equation. And I'm just going to digress for a second because this is effing fascinating to me. He has this equation that he's working on. And in it, he had the square of the electron charge, okay? And you can quantify it into a number. And in this equation, there was the square. And to solve it, you have to do the square root, right? So if you have 25, what's the square root of 25? Well, you're going to say 5, but you're only going to be half right because it could be 5 or minus 5, right? Because minus 5 times minus 5 is 25. Negative times a negative is positive. So the square root of 9 is not 3, it's 3 and negative 3. I mean, it is 3, but that's only part of the answer. So the square root of the negatively charged electron's charge, the square root of the square of the negatively charged electron's charge is going to output a negative number, which is the normal charge of the electron, but also a positive number. And he's like scratching his head going, what in that? There must be something wrong. He went through, nothing wrong. He finally says, look, the math is telling me there's a positively charged electron out there. It wasn't until, and I can't remember the dude's name, that discovered the positively charged electron in a cloud chamber, because basically it was an electron that came through the cloud chamber, had all the curved in a magnetic field the same way an electron would, but it curved in the opposite direction. And they said, damn it, we have discovered the positron. And now, 50-some years later, we're using it in, as a routine thing. People have PET scans every day. It's insane to think about. And what's really insane is the math showed. So how is it that our universe is so well described on a certain level by mathematics that you could have some dude just doing some math and mathing away, and then he goes, whoa, there must be a positively charged electron. And it was there. He discovered it not by doing an experiment, by fucking around with mathematical formulas. Einstein didn't do a single experiment to do special or general relativity. They did experiments to verify it. But it was all done in his head, thinking about how the universe had to be. But he had the ability to think of not take things for granted and assume that when he's on a rocket ship going 99.999% of the speed of light, that when he flashes a flashlight in front of him, that he's going to see that flashlight. If he had a mirror way the hell out there and bounced that beam, he would measure 186,000 miles per second as the speed of that beam. Well, how's that possible when he's going 185,000 miles per second? That's because there's a principle in physics that says that the speed of light will be measured as the same by all observers, regardless of their frame of reference. And when you understand that, then you understand that that guy sitting on that rocket ship shooting this beam of light out has to measure that beam of light going 186,000 miles per second. And the only way that that's even remotely possible is if time has slowed down for that person. Slowed down so much so that this beam that's going, actually retreating from that person, a foot a second, if you could measure it that way, if you were an independent observer looking at it and watching it, outpace that rocket ship by just say, 1 foot every second. That it had to be. The independent observer sees that. Both of these people are going, the light's going at the speed of light. The person's going at 99.999% of the speed of light. But they're so slowed down because they have to be to perceive this light beam exiting their flashlight at the speed of light. And from that, everything else follows. Causation is preserved because things can't go faster than the speed of light. And then when you start saying, well, how does this work in a gravitational field? And then now you have general relativity. And that took a lot more. The math of general relativity is pretty dense and hard to understand. The math of special relativity is actually pretty simple. And when you understand that it just had to work that way, it's fascinating. But Einstein was the first one to figure that out. Now, you say, well, how did Einstein figure out that light curves in a gravitational field? Well, this is how he did it, using a thing called the equivalence principle. And the equivalence principle is if you're in a box and you're accelerating at 10 meters per second, which is the acceleration due to gravity, you cannot tell. There's not an experiment that you can do that says, I can tell I'm not in a gravitational field. So if that's the case, if gravity is just acceleration, then if you opened up a hole in the side of that elevator or this box that's traveling, and you shot a beam of light into it, of course, it would hit, the beam of light would hit the hole at one place, but as this thing is continuing to accelerate, the beam of light would hit the far wall a little bit lower, right? Because the box has had a chance to move in the time that it came in through the hole. Now, because the speed of light is so fast, it would be hard for you and I to perceive that. But if he was going fast enough, you could see the beam actually curving as it comes in, because it's coming in the left side of this box, and then the box is accelerating forward, and so the beam is actually hitting lower on the opposite side on the opposite wall. And now Einstein goes, well, hell, if it's happening in that box and it's indistinguishable from being in a gravitational field, then that same beam of light would curve the same amount in a gravitational field that had the same acceleration attributed to it. And from there, my friends, stemmed general relativity. All the rest was just figuring out the math. How in the hell do you figure this out in 3D space? And from that came the prediction of black holes, which we have now taken a picture of. We've seen things orbiting the black hole in the center of our galaxy. That's a cool video. Go do that. Go right now, as soon as you're done listening to the show, do a YouTube search on stars orbiting the central black hole of the Milky Way, and you will see some shit that will blow your mind. And it's absolutely incredible. And all of this from a thought experiment about a guy or a woman or an animal or whatever traveling in a box going through space accelerated at 10 meters per second and trying to figure out if they could tell if they were in a damn box or not. Now, can we tell that we're not boxes in a that our brain is actually in a vat and being fed these stimulations, that right now your brain is in a vat and you are perceiving me talking to you through your Sirius XM radio or through your podcast player or however you're listening to this, that's a whole nother discussion for another day, my friends, one in which we will call Pot Talk with Dr. Steve. So let's get back to this article. Boy, that was some digression. So they did this PET scan and everything was normal. And because the normal findings from the imaging evaluation, this guy went through the $1 million workup. Oh, this poor bastard. The patient was interviewed again, and he described a daily intake of 3 quarts of soy milk. Now, come on. I should give them the whole full boo. This guy had this giant workup, and this was sitting there the whole time, and they just didn't take a complete history. So they make this thing, we did all of this, and so we interviewed him again, and then we found this out. Should have found this out the first time. After he discontinued drinking soy milk, his breast tenderness resolved and his estradiol concentrations returned to normal. So they said this is a very unusual case of gynecomastia related to ingestion of soy products. Healthcare providers should thoroughly review patients' dietary habits, really, to possibly reveal the etiology of medical conditions. So they're going to school us on that after they put this guy through, $20,000 worth of testing. And now they're schooling us. Hey, you people, make sure you ask your patients about whether they're drinking soy. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Who are these clowns? Well, I don't know that they're clowns. That was in 2008. We'll say they weren't thinking about it. So they're saying it's quite unusual. And I was just going to go to pubmed.gov. Let's do that, pubmed.gov. And let's do soy and gynecomastia. Okay, soy ingestion. We should probably do nutritional soy. Let's put in nutritional. Okay, and gynecomastia. So let's just see real quick here. Okay, got nothing there, so let's just do soy and gynecomastia then. Okay, 4 articles. Soy protein formula in children, no hormonal effects in long-term feeding. Well, yeah, think about this. There's soy formula where some kids who are, cow's milk intolerant or other formula intolerant, they'll put them on soy. And also, don't forget, there's billions of people on this earth that's primary protein in their diet is soy, and they seem to do okay. So dietary soy protein containing isoflavonoids. God. Okay, I'm giving myself another one of these. This has not been a good day. I am not firing on all 4 cylinders. I only got 4 hours sleep last night. I'll give myself that, but not really much of an excuse. Dietary soy protein containing isoflavonoids does not adversely affect the reproductive tract of male. Oh, what in the hell is this? Cynomolgus macaques. Okay, it's Macaca fascicularis. That's their species name, macaca, because they throw their macaca if you're at the zoo looking at them through the glass. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Soybean isoflavone exposure does not have feminizing effects on men. A critical examination of the clinical evidence. Well, that's what we want. Thank you. That's what we're looking for.
Give yourself a bill.
The objective was to critically evaluate the clinical evidence and, when not available, the animal data most relevant to concerns that isoflavone exposure in the form of supplements or soy foods has a feminizing effect on men. So what this design was a Medline literature review and cross-reference of published data. So this is one of those where, I just really want to get published, but I don't feel like doing a study and going through the investigational review board, which, by the way, I totally understand. I'm doing a study on virtual reality for anxiety relief in the chemotherapy suite. And holy crap, you wouldn't believe the stuff you got to go through to try to get a human study approved. And so I've got to take all these classes and all this stuff. It's like, geez, I've got 100 articles in the medical literature, but no, because this is a clinical study, I've got to do this. So anyway, so I do understand it, but that is sort of a cheap-ass way of getting published. But anyway, because you're just reviewing other people's work. But it says here, in contrast to the results of some rodent studies, findings from recently published meta-analysis, that's where they take a bunch of different studies and mush the data together and then analyze it. Subsequently published studies show that neither isoflavonoid supplements nor isoflavone-rich soy affect total or free testosterone levels. Similarly, there's essentially no evidence from the 9 identified clinical studies that isoflavone exposure affects circulating estrogen levels in men. They have no effect on sperm or semen parameters, although only 3 intervention studies were identified. None were longer than 3 months. So, that's good that they told us that. So there's, it may be there, but if it is, it's in the time needed to detect that difference is longer than 3 months. Findings from animal studies suggesting that isoflavones increase the risk of erectile dysfunction are not applicable to men because of differences in isoflavone metabolism between rodents and humans. Can you imagine doing a study on rodent erectile dysfunction? I mean, how odd. What do you do? I mean, do you have to go down there and manipulate them to see if they get a rod? It's horrendous. Anyway, so they said the intervention data indicate that isoflavones do not exert feminizing effects on men at intake levels equal to and even considerably higher than typical for Asian males. Even we're talking about a population that eats a lot of soy, in their diet. So there you go. So the data does not support that hypothesis. So I'm going to say you're okay drinking your soy products. Thanks always go to Dr. Scott, even when he isn't here. And to Cliff, Andrews, Cody, Gilmer, Lady Diagnosis. We can't forget Rob Sprance, Bob Kelly, Greg Hughes, Anthony Cumia, Jim Norton. Oh, we can't forget Jenny McKinney, Travis Teff, Lewis Johnson, Paul Opcharski, Eric Nagel, Roland Campos, Sam Roberts, Pat Duffy, Dennis Falcone, Ron Bennington, Fez Watley, whose early support of this show has never gone unappreciated. Listen to our SiriusXM show on the Faction Talk channel, SiriusXM channel 103, Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, on demand, and other times at Jim McClure's pleasure. And many thanks to you all, our listeners whose voicemail and topic ideas make this job very easy. Go to our website at drsteve.com. Until next time, check your stupid nuts for lumps, quit smoking, get off your asses, and get some exercise. We'll see you in 1 week for the next edition of Weird Medicine.